good evening, and welcome to welcome to 30-minute reviews. I am Adam. It still takes some getting used to doing this as news arrives, considering I usually only do this for beware of spoilers. But I've started doing this now because, number one, it makes it easier for those looking for news to find a concise, at most 30 minutes talking about the topic. And then on top of it, it also makes it easier for me because invariably, if I don't cover it immediately, there are things that I will forget to write down in my little notes app, and I'll forget to cover it, and, then it just doesn't get covered. And then I get an email, and it's like, you didn't cover this. And it's like, well, okay, great. Sorry. Like, the fuck? So, we're going to talk about today's big news story, that being Village Roadshow has filed a lawsuit against Warner Brothers over the streaming on HBO Max of The Matrix Resurrections. Here's the thing. I don't know if Village Roadshow really has a leg to stand on here. Number one, they say that, they used the cachet of the, of the Matrix franchise to build their credibility with, HBO Max, to build the credibility of HBO Max. I don't think the Matrix is quite the pull that other studios, that other IP that went to there, Cry Macho was atrocious. It was not a good movie. Arguably, that did more to pull people to HBO Max that wouldn't have ordinarily had it than The Matrix did. Wonder Woman 1984. What else was there? Tom and Jerry, Space Jam. They had another... The Suicide Squad went to HBO Max. That was a huge fucking movie, and that went to HBO Max. I don't think that, The Matrix is going to pull anyone new who wouldn't have done it already, based on what was already there. I don't think there was anyone new going, well, this new Matrix movie might be good, so let me do that. First of all, if going based on what happened with The Matrix up until The Matrix Resurrections, with Revolutions and Reloaded, to think that, this was not going to be good was kind of I went into that movie with very low expectations, and it kind of cleared my very low expectations, but not by much. It's not like it was, astronomically good or something like that. It was, fine. And I think that it just wasn't great. And I don't think The Matrix is going to do that, number one. Number two, I don't think that it's enough to say that happened. Number three, I think the issue comes in with the fact that this wasn't announced the week before that this was happening. It was not announced immediately before the movie came out that they were going to do this. The Matrix was the last of the 2021 Warner Bros. Release movies. And they were doing this from the beginning of 2021, where they said, we're going to put all of our 2021 offerings hybrid on HBO Max and in theaters. And they said that in December, or maybe January, because if I remember correctly, Judas and the Black Messiah was the first. And then, the little things with Jared Leto and Rami Malek, and there was that Angelina Jolie movie, and of course Suicide Squad, Tom and Jerry, Space Jam, Godzilla vs. Kong, Dune. Those all drove viewership. And to say that, The Matrix is the one that's oh, well, this really drove viewership, it's well, not really. Now, I'm not saying they should have done this without consulting. That's not the correct way to do business. They should have consulted with the production partners. They should have done that. But to say that at this point, it's well, we were blindsided by it. It's well, you had almost a full year to get to that point. It's not I understand Scarlett Johansson's argument. Because Scarlett Johansson, they didn't do anything regarding moving to Disney Plus until they moved the release date that last time, and then Black Widow went to Disney Plus. And that's kind of a big deal. That's a big reason why she was suing, is that it's like, well, you didn't, work with us on this. And then they resolved the lawsuit, and it all, happened, and it all ended. And it's like, well, cool, that's done, but I feel like here it's a little bit different, because they had almost, if not a full year's notice, that they were going to do that. And they could have been like, hey, we're going to not work with you anymore as a studio. Like, Village Roadshow just won't go to Warner Brothers anymore to distribute. We'll go somewhere else. Like, you think we can't get 20th Century? Well, Disney to do it? Like, we can't get Universal? We can't go to... Like, there are other options on the table if you're going to be a pain in the ass about this. And I feel like that you can't say at this point that you got fucked. It's like, if someone tells you that something's going to happen and then you don't act on it and then it happens, it's like, well, fuck. And then the other question I have is, how much did they actually lose at the box office with the HBO Max hybrid release? Because let's look at, early in the pandemic, or early in the return to theatrical, In the Heights came out, hybrid theatrical and HBO Max. It made $11 million opening weekend. And then at the end of the year, they put Disney 20th Century under Disney put out West Side Story. And West Side Story only did $9 million. How does West Side Story, directed by what's it called? Like, West Side Story has infinitely more notoriety than In the Heights. Like, yeah, In the Heights has Lin-Manuel Miranda, but there's no famous person in that movie. Like, say what you will about the cast of West Side Story, but you can't say that what's his name in the lead is not a known name. He was in The Fault in Our Stars, Baby Driver. He has screen credits. Like, the lead in what's it called? The lead in The Heights is one of Lin-Manuel Miranda's, people he works with a lot, Anthony Ramos. And it's like, you can't say it's the same thing. And it's like, it doesn't have, the director cachet is not there for In the Heights, the same it is for West Side Story. And people know West Side Story because it has a very famous adaptation for the screen with Natalie Wood back in 1961. So people knew, and that movie did less than In the Heights. And it wasn't hybrid. I couldn't go on Hulu and watch West Side Story, or go on Disney Plus and watch West Side Story. It only came out in theaters. I saw In the Heights in theaters, and it was an empty theater except for one other person who was sitting in the same row as me. And I talked about that when I did the podcast about it right after, where it's like, why the fuck are you sitting next to me in an entirely empty theater? I see this, and I don't know how much money they think they lost out on. Like, are they looking at the numbers that Spider-Man made and thinking that they lost out on Spider-Man level money? Because I don't think they were. Because Black Widow made $90 million. That's Black Widow, though. Dune made almost $40 million, or just over $40 million. And that's better than, what's his name, Denis Villeneuve made on any of his other movies. That's his high. Like, that's his theatrical high. So I don't know what he thinks would have happened, but I think we're getting a fairly accurate representation of what that box office would have been had it come out just in theaters. I don't think the box office has been impacted all that much by the HBO Max. And I could be totally wrong. I'm not an industry insider. I don't present myself as someone who, knows what they're talking about in a real sense. What I know is that, I can look at the numbers and I can say, well, this is what the numbers are indicating to me. The fact that, I think if West Side Story came out exclusively in theaters when In the Heights did, it would not have done as well as it did. it wouldn't have made even $9 million, I don't think. Because when In the Heights came out, it was still during, people were still afraid to go back to theaters. This was very early on. I think it was just after Black Widow, or maybe just before Black Widow. I want to say just before. I want to say it came out in June. Black Widow came out in July. But you mean to tell me that you think that people would have, the fact that we have this other case study for another movie that's similar in that, and it's the other thing is, too, we can also look at whatever Dear Evan Hansen did. Now, Dear Evan Hansen wasn't as good, but Dear Evan Hansen didn't put up the numbers that, that people would have expected. I think that we're looking at numbers that would have been accurate for the box office, regardless of if the movie came out in theaters or went theatrical. Or went hybrid or went theatrical. I think that's kind of a big deal here that we're not really addressing, is that the hybrid model didn't impact the box office the way everyone thought it would. I think that people saying that Dune would have done, let's double. Let's say Dune made $80 million. I think it is incredibly unlikely that Dune would have done an $80 million opening weekend. I don't think that people who watched Dune at home would have gone to theaters and saw Dune. My sister is not a science fiction fan. She watched Dune on HBO Max, but she wouldn't have gone to the theater to watch Dune. She's not me, where I would go to the movie theater to see, just about anything, as evidenced by, I saw fucking Hard Luck Love Song on, in theaters. I will go to the theaters and see, anything. If it seems interesting or it's something that, people haven't really talked about or anything like that, I'll go to the theater to see anything. And I think that, asshole, to say that, if he keep driving, he's got this thing, I Heart Jesus, on the back of his truck. If he's going 80 on the service road, and he's it's one of those things where if you really want to meet Jesus that bad, you can just keep driving the way you are, and you will fucking drive off the road. Because it's cold, too, and it's there's ice, and he's just an asshole. Anyway, that's the thing, too. It's I think people may have been more willing to try out movies they wouldn't have ordinarily, but I don't think, the Zendaya stan army that claims that they were oh, well, we thought Zendaya was going to be in the movie when we watched it and Zendaya wasn't. I don't think they would have gone out in droves to see Zendaya in Dune. Once reviews came out and were hey, Zendaya's not in the movie, they wouldn't have gone out to see the movie in droves. In the same way that, the Zendaya fan base didn't drive sales of Spider-Man No Way Home. And I think that Spider-Man No Way Home is looking at a very similar box office to what it would have done no pandemic. Maybe it would have had slightly more staying power, and it wouldn't have had as big of a drop-off between week 1 and week 2, but it would have done roughly the same. It still would have, maybe it would have crossed 2 billion. Or has it crossed 2 billion? I don't know, I haven't been keeping up, but, I don't think it would have beaten Endgame, or Avatar, or Titanic, but it would have done the numbers that it's doing now, I think. Venom Let There Be Carnage should be the ultimate case study in this, where it's look, this movie is not great, and it set a record for the month of October. Not pandemic record, but it set a record for the month of October. And it's the same thing with, No Time to Die. No Time to Die did very well for itself. But the movies that came out that didn't do well, I don't think that was because of the pandemic anymore. We can't say it's because of the pandemic people still hesitant to go to movie theaters. It's going to be an easy thing to hide behind. But if we look at the numbers, where it's movies that people like with established franchises, they're going to go to the movies to see. And Bob Iger said something similar and got shit all over for it, where it's all it did was expedite the process that was already on, it moved theatrical in a way that it wasn't before, where it's oh, well, these movies that aren't entirely worth going to movies to see, I'm not going to go and see it in the theater. I'm if it's not a big spectacle movie that's seeing it in IMAX or something like that, if it's not one of those, I'm not going to go and waste my time and money and go to the movie theater and see, I don't think Death on the Nile is going to do terrifically well because it's not a spectacle movie. It's one of these things that, look at all these really pretty people doing an Agatha Christie. And it's okay, cool, but is that worth seeing in theaters? I don't think so. I'm going to see it. I'm going Wednesday to see Death on the Nile. I'm a fan of a good whodunit, but I don't think that it is something that's going to draw a lot of money. Like, look at Last Night in Soho, which did not do hybrid. Did not do well. I mean, I don't know how much The Matrix did. If they want to sue them for anything, I think saying we're going to put The Matrix out the week after Spider-Man, I think that's the bigger deal here, not the fact that they put it, like, because in this case, Village Roadshow is the production company, as is Warner Brothers. They handled half the production, but at the same time, Village Roadshow also handled a bit of the, like, they didn't handle the distribution, Warner Brothers did. I think Warner Brothers set it up to fail with a really shitty date. Like, putting it out the week after Spider-Man, I think, was the death knell. I think that had Spider-Man came out and did the money it did, and they were like, oh shit, we should move this, that would have been the first thing on my thing. But at that point, they'd already done a bunch of tie-in commercials with DirecTV Stream and things like that. But, like, that's my thinking, is that if I'm someone at Warner Bros. And I see them, like, what happens there, I'm like, oh shit, this is not going to do well next week, because this movie's going to get asses in seats. And then the other thing is, it's like, it's not set up in a situation where it's conducive to making a lot of money. I think that's the bigger issue here, not the HBO Max. I think it's, if there is a lawsuit to be had, it's you set the movie up for failure with a shitty release date. And I think that's the bigger issue here, not the issue of, well, and maybe that's part of it, where it's like, people were willing to stay home to watch The Matrix rather than go to the theaters to watch The Matrix, because they'd rather go and see Spider-Man a second time. Because, like, I watched The Matrix, like, at home on HBO Max. I didn't go to the theater to watch The Matrix. I was open about that when I did the review. I watched it, at home. I didn't watch it on HBO Max. I didn't watch it, in theaters. So I don't think that the movie really, I don't think seeing it in theaters, there's nothing there that's really, like, a spectacle about it that's like, I have to see this. Like, when I watch it, it's not like, oh, this looks so much better on a big screen. Like, there are movies where that happens, where it's like, oh, this looks better in a big screen, and I have to see this in an environment with other people. Like, No Way Home has that. No Way Home, that, like, there are movies that you will see in your life that you need to see with an audience, because there's an energy to it. Like, No Way Home, the scene with Ned opening the portal, and spoilers if you haven't seen No Way Home yet, and then Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man comes out, like, my first thought, as there was very loud cheering that he appeared in the theater, like Portals in Endgame level cheering, was like, fucking 5 years ago, if Andrew Garfield showed up in a Marvel movie, people would not have been cheering, because people fucking hated his Spider-Man. But here he is, he's showing up, and everyone's like, whoa! And it's like, it's that kind of thing that, like, not only, seeing it in that format, but seeing it in a room with other people was part of it. There was nothing in The Matrix that communal experience would have added to. And I feel like that's a big part of why The Matrix didn't have, why a lot of people were comfortable seeing The Matrix on HBO Max. But, like, that's the thing, too. It's like Spider-Man was dethroned by Scream, and there was nothing about Scream that screamed, no pun intended, rewatchability, which is a big part of it. Like, if a movie's going to have staying power at the theater, there's got to be something that I'm going to see multiple times. Like, I saw Eternals twice in theaters, and really it was because I took my brother the second time. Like, I went by myself the first time, I took my brother the second time. But I would have seen that movie twice in theaters anyway, probably, because, and there were a few times where it's like, I don't know, there's nothing really playing, let me go, I have my 3 a week, maybe I'll just go see the Eternals again, and it's like, yeah, I'll go home and, do some work instead. But, like, there was something there to drive you to the theater. There was something about it that it's like, okay, this needs to be watched. There was something there where it's like watching that and seeing, like, for me in that movie, I love the sequence with, what's it called? the sequence with when they're showing the origins of the universe, and she's talking to it's not Azeroth. I forgot the name of the Celestial, the Judgment Celestial. But when she's talking to him, no, I think that's a streamer on Twitch. No, I don't remember the name of it. But when he's talking to her, and she goes, and he's showing her like the creation of universes and like the World Forge, which I probably not the name of it. I think it's the name for like DC's version of it. But like showing the World Forge and how worlds are made by the Celestials and all of that. It was such a cool moment that I'm like, this is gonna be cool. This is worth going to see in the theater. This is a good use of that. Like, I don't like, for me at least. I know a lot of people thought the movie was too long, and it's like for me, I really liked the Eternals. But I don't like. When I saw Spider-Man No Way Home, I saw it that first time. I saw it the second time. I was like, I cannot wait to see this movie again when I go again to see it. Like, that was a moment for me where I was like, this is going to be awesome. This is worth going to see a second time in a way that very few other movies have that. And again, I don't think The Matrix would have had that. There's nothing about The Matrix that screams, you have to see this more than one time, and when you see it more than one time, you'll find different things about it that, that you'll find and enjoy, and it's not something you have to see multiple times in the theater, because that's the thing, too. It's like, if you want to see it multiple times, then it's coming out on, it's coming out on HBO Max. There is, you can watch it multiple times on HBO Max. Because HBO Max, it's not watch it once and it goes away. Like if you rented it. It's there, you can watch it forever. Or for the month until it goes back full time. And I think that fundamentally the issue comes from the fact that like saying that you didn't using it just for the cachet of your streaming service, saying you're going to monopolize on the Matrix for that, I don't think that's enough. Because the thing is, they did delay the Batman into 2022 because they thought the Batman would be a subscription driver. It would not be I think the Batman is known to be a subscription driver for HBO Max, but they also knew they'd make a fuck ton of money on in theatrical. They moved that once they said we're putting all of our 2022 slate on there. They were like, okay, we're gonna move this now. This isn't coming out in 2021. This is moving. If that's a correct timeline of events, I think they because I remember like when they announced, putting our entire slate, I was like, oh fuck, the Batman's going to HBO Max. Because at that point we didn't know that theaters were gonna be reopened. And I'm from New York, where they were most hesitant about reopening stuff. One of the most hesitant places about reopening stuff, and it's one of those things where it's like, oh fuck, they're gonna do that. That's gonna be awesome. And it's like, okay, cool, but what's going on here? As I recall, when they originally made the announcement, the Batman was included in that announcement, and then they moved the Batman out of 2021 into 2022 because they were like, this is gonna do money. And I think had they thought the Matrix was gonna make money, they would have moved it out. And I think that the Matrix is not the brand that the Batman is for modern audiences, to be like, oh yeah, the fourth Matrix movie is coming out. Let me go and get a subscription to HBO Max. Whereas, there's a new Batman with Robert Pattinson, directed by the guy who that's the thing. It's like the amount of stuff going for it. It's like, one of the Wachowskis did this. Yeah, Keanu's in it. Yeah, and here's Carrie-Anne Moss. And oh, cool, all right. But, the Batman had so much more going for it in terms of this will drive people to HBO Max. I don't know. Unless the entire thing is contingent on them saying that they intentionally gave it a bad date with the intent that, they need to, with the intent that, this is going to get you to watch it on HBO Max instead of going to the theater. But at that point, they can't say that they knew that No Way Home was going to do the money it did. At most, what a movie did was $90 million at that point. Like, it's not like there had been a movie up until that point that had done $210 million in its opening weekend since 2019. Like, that's a long-ass time to be like, oh, well, this can be expected now. Like, no, I don't think they expected that to happen. I think that, like, you know, it's not like they're sitting there reading rumors for Spider-Man No Way Home the way that we are, and being like, oh, well, in Spider-Man No Way Home, it's rumored that they're going to have, you know, the other Spider-Men show up, and they're also going to have, you know, Matt Murdock's going to show up, and, you know, it's going to have all these other villains, and it's like, I mean, yeah, they probably knew some of it and heard some of it, but it's not like it was something where it's like, oh, well, we know exactly what's going to happen in this movie, so we can put this out here, and people will watch it at home, and it's you know, it's good counter-programming. I mean, unless that's the allegation. If that's the allegation, then the lawsuit kind of makes sense. But if the allegation is, oh, well, you know, this is a, like, they put it out on streaming and didn't tell us, and that's where it went wrong, I don't think you can make that, like, that's an allegation that would be hard to prove, because you had a lot of time between them announcing that and the movie coming out to object to them doing that, especially considering it never moved dates once it was announced that the movie was going to streaming. Like, once it was announced that the movie was going to streaming, that was your chance to be like, oh, hey, this is, you know, this is not good. Like, this is going to, like, you know, this is a problem. We don't agree to this. But they never made that allegation until now. I don't know. That's just my 2 cents on it. I don't know how accurate that is, but that's how I feel after reading that lawsuit and seeing what's going on. It feels like something that it's like, hey, wait a minute. You know, someone at Village Roadshow had to have voiced this a lot earlier and not wait until February, 2 months after release, to be like, hey, wait, what the fuck? So yeah, so we'll wrap up there for today. We'll be back later this week with any news that may happen, and until then, have a great rest of your week.